So this is when I take this whole idea of creativity. Yeah, we're this little person in this who gets to do some things, and it's really great. But we're part of what God intended for humanity. We actually get to reflect it publicly in a way, which is really cool. And that's an honor to do that. That's a way of prophecy the word apocalypse just means reveal.
Yes.
We're unveiling God. We unveil God when we actually are in that flow.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am so honored to welcome this mentor, author, songwriter, worship leader. He's been in every facet of the creative lifestyle, and now he's going to help us here on the God and Gig Show. So, Rich Kirkpatrick, welcome to our show. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. It's early here on the West Coast compared to you, but I'm doing great.
Yes, you are getting up a little earlier. I'm here in the East Coast and recording, and it is a beautiful day in the summer. I mean, I believe as we were talking before we got on the air that you've got a teacher in your family and as your wife, so you're used to early mornings. I think both with church and the run of life. This is not new to you, getting up and getting started.
It's not, and they used to let little boys have paper routes way back in the day. That's dating myself quite a bit. So 4 o'clock in the morning, this little boy that had little slits for eyes would get up and fold papers and deliver them on a bicycle in East San Jose, hoping it wouldn't get shot at. But it got the papers out, and it was a great thing. But getting up in the morning, even though I've done it, Ellen, it's not my favorite thing.
Well, we can get right into that whole thing between the late nights, the early mornings. The creative lifestyle does not seem to fit the 9 to 5 at all. But as we just mentioned, you have so much experience, not to give this as some kind of age or sage or anything like that. But I definitely have been learning about you over the last few weeks and months, just really intrigued. And so if someone is meeting you like me for the first time, really getting to know you, what are the first few things that you want them to know about you in terms of your career and maybe just your life and what you're all about?
Well, I started out as a young musician, 18 years old, got a full scholarship to go to a music school, had no idea what I was getting myself into. Away from home, 1,800 miles, the school that I went to, trade school. I thought I was going to be a musician in a studio where I didn't have to be in front of people.
Okay.
Right? I mean, I thought, hey, I could do jingles, which don't exist anymore, by the way. But okay, I had all these ideas, you do when you're a young person. And somehow volunteering in my local church after that stint at the school. And I ended up being a worship leader. And I started out in that music department, though, handwriting out orchestral arrangements, transcribing latest songs, because we didn't really have like Planning Center or CCLI, Song Select, or places you could just, or praisecharge.com. You had none of those things. So you had to be those things. And so I was a kid. They said, you're delivering pizzas, Rich. How much do you make delivering pizzas? We'll match it if you can come help us with the church, because I had taken one of their choir arrangements that was terribly, terribly done. And I redid it and handed it to the music director. I'm not just delivering pizzas now. And then I was in ministry, and somehow that led to a church plant from a church from scratch where you had to how do you build a worship team? I don't know. Rich, build a worship team. Okay, I'm 20 something years old. I don't know how to do that. So how to do that. Rich, how we have 5 services. You got to come put this band together for this bigger church. Somehow I got hired for accident because the main instrumentalist, she was having a baby the next day, and they were desperate enough, so they hired me. Anyway, so and that journey led me to some really interesting places where I went on to plant another church, and I also ended up in a couple really large churches where I had staff people and I was on the executive teams, and no one ever told me how to do that stuff. And so I was leading creatives, putting on conference, all these different kinds of things by the time I was in my early 30s, mid to mid 30s. And no one ever told me about how to maintain that kind of pace, what that meant. I was a kid who didn't want to be in front of people. I just wanted to do music. And somehow God had opened those doors for me, and people saw gifting and things like that. But what they didn't do, and part of the story is that ministry almost killed my artistry. And the story of that is sometimes in ministry, you're chosen because of your skill, but you're not loved for who you are. And understanding what creativity means was something I missed, that it's a calling beyond a title like a worship leader or worship director or music this, or I did production direction, all those things. It is called to be a creator. Tolkien called it sub-creator. And somehow missing that as a young person kind of handicapped me in a way. And if Tolkien says we're sub-creators, and if you like Lord of the Rings, that's who that guy is, by the way, he's pretty creative. He's done some really neat things. But he understood that his calling was to be an image bearer of God who makes things. And his thing happened to be these cool stories about elves and stuff like that. What we get called to do as creatives in a church setting is incredible. But in doing so, I realized how much is lacking for myself and also the institutions. So, and what I'm doing today, I guess, is trying to circle back and say, God's only given us so many laps around the sun. What am I going to do with whatever these laps, how many I have left? And part of it is to help people be reignited and to unlock that person that God made them to be. Because we're all wired to be creative. Just because some of us are more creative because I have hair that goes up a little high, and I'm a nerd, right? They say musicians are just guys and gals with cool clothes and hair and stuff like that. It's true. We are so nerdy. We want to learn how that instrument works and plays, and
Yeah,
they have no idea. They have
yeah,
no idea,
it just
right?
comes out of us. I've always struggled with that. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I always struggled with
Oh
that
no,
whole
please.
creative versus non-creative. Like obviously, God puts the same spirit in all of us, His spirit, right? So He is a creator, and I love what you do with the Tolkien. But I have struggled with that idea of we have this different life, we have this different way of looking at the world, and meanwhile looking at the accountant who might creatively be able to put numbers together, and the plumber who can creatively come up with a thing to. So I always have struggled with that same thing of, yes, I'm speaking to creatives, you're speaking to creatives, quote unquote, right? But in a way, there's this thing that we don't want to put ourselves in a silo. But absolutely, I love where this is going, and I want to go back a little bit just before you kept telling us about this issue of who we are, our identity, because that's really what I want to focus on. You just said it: ministry versus creativity. Who we are, speaking to the person, and as many of us are raised in the church or brought up in the church, I just wonder where you think that disconnect started. I mean, you found it in the midst of doing the thing, but I wonder whether you think the church, or even in terms of just how we approach creativity, why is there a disconnect between the person, the creative, the human being, and the production of what we do? Is that disconnect just a nature of being in church ministry, or is it a nature or something that's a little bit deeper?
I don't know if it's deeper or not. I just know that what we do is we disembody Christianity. I think maybe that is pretty deep.
It is, but let's
So,
dig into it.
so think of it this way: Jesus, the incarnation, is this miracle that God, Word in flesh, walks among us and is limited by time and space, and is limited by power. He's even born into a refugee family. Literally, has to go run for the border and seek refuge. His family isn't of high stature. He isn't a person who has a lot of, hey, look, I'm born into the world because of my name. I'm powerful. No, God chooses to come in a time and space very vulnerably, like a lamb, and totally destroys our view of what we operate as Christians. We view creativity as a competition, as something to draw and impress people, empower them so they come to Jesus. Put on crusades, we put on all these things. And so creatives' jobs generally in a Christian setting is to exert some kind of power and influence. But our call is to be more like this lamb, who's a vulnerable lamb, who's there just offering himself as he's designed to do. And of course, he's the creator, so he gets to design what that is. We're not. We have a design already in us. And so the disconnect, I believe, is disembodying. It's taking away the talent from the person. So we always see leadership has to match character. Well, character isn't just this disembodied idea. It has to happen in real skin.
Yeah.
And we take the real skin of a person away. We say, this is what this person does. We put leaders on pedestals, sometimes even creatives. We get on these pedestals. We become kind of a conduit for the church to worship if we're in that realm of worship leading. And what we're doing gives people certain catharsis because they're watching us do it. But are they doing it? Do we value leadership in that? So we disembody what it is to be creative. We think it's just for a utilitarian purpose. One story I wrote in the book was, this is very true. Giant church, and I was new and young, and so I didn't know I wasn't supposed to ask questions like this. We're giving a Bible study about how plants are only useful when they produce something for us. So that's why God created them, and so we need to be likewise. And something sunk in me was, what it was is that God created me. Maybe I'm a flower. Maybe I don't have this purpose where I'm going to be a tomato and I'm part of pasta sauce or
Right.
something.
Yeah. Yeah. Something. Yeah. Something
You know,
to be
I'm the
used.
flower.
Yeah.
Yeah, that the bees come and pollinate that don't necessarily make fruit, but they still are part of the ecosystem. And they're there because they have color and beauty, perhaps, and God wants to reflect his glory. And is that enough? Sometimes it's not enough for those of us who are creatives to simply be. So creativity, as I explain it in my book, is something that's both useful and beautiful, something that solves a problem, but it's also beyond us. It's also something we can't hold on to. We understand we don't own it. It's something to be given away that's given to us. And those two things have to work together. And that's bridging what I call the science and the magic. Those are really metaphors, not literally magic, but magic is imagination and reason. So we have reasoning, we have imagination, we have logic, and we have dreams. All those things encompass what human beings are. And if we take away one side of that, we take away the reasoning and we're only dreaming, we're not going to get anything done. And we know that. But most of us wouldn't even be listening to the show if we weren't people who had to get things done and wanted to get better at it. So that really the understanding, the disconnect is this, Alan. It's the person away from what they're given, just like we want utility and not beauty. We need both.
Okay, that was absolutely. I'm so glad we dug into it right away because there's no way we can talk about the actual reality of the Christian and the creative life without digging into both. You already said it. We talk about the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, of spirit, soul, and body, right? There's no way that we could take one of these pieces out and then the other two remain what they really are. They all complement each other. And so I love the fact that we dug into this. And I want to really like immediately hone in on what it means in reality because I'm thinking about the creative. I'm thinking about always try to put myself in the seat of that person. I get the free coaching by being the person that you would be speaking to. And so here I am. I'm trying to make a living. I feel this struggle to stay inspired. And you just talked about this bridge between science and magic. And by the way, I struggled with this word magic as soon as you said it as well. I was the guy that told my son can't read Harry Potter because of the lightning bolt. My son actually put the lightning bolt on his head. He was so enamored with Harry Potter. Until I realized that you just mentioned Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and the deep magic and the fact that these metaphors were necessary for us to understand something that is always going to be beyond the, as you meant, the tangible, the stuff. And so God has always used and had no problem with creatives using these metaphors to make sure that we understand that there's a world beyond this, what we can see and touch. But I just wanted to flesh that a little bit for those of us who are right in the thick of making a living, right in the thick of deciding, okay, am I going to make this to sell to someone? Am I going to charge for this thing? And we're right in the thick of the social media morass of all this content that we're told you have to do these things. And meanwhile, you just said, well, this is beauty that's just supposed to be. So can you help us with that actual walking it out day to day when you say to yourself, am I doing this just to make a living, to make a buck? Is there any magic to this? Or am I just supposed to be focusing on the nuts and bolts and the science of it?
I think what the bridge between science and magic is saying is that we have to travel back and forth. We have to travel between an idea and the implementation of that idea.
Yeah.
So scientists have really called this two kinds of thinking, and two brain networks are involved in that. And the kind of thinking is divergent thinking and convergent thinking. And that's the science and magic are basically metaphors for that. Convergent thinking is the middle school math problem, word math problem, where it has one right answer. And that's just pretty clear that that's what the goal of taking all the information you have from that question on the test and creating one answer for it. So you have all these ideas you have, for instance, and you make a list, a priority. And that's what convergent thinking is. And we're in our society, business books and all these things, that's what they really focus on.
Yeah.
The other kind of thinking is divergent thinking, which is basically taking the brakes off thoughts coming into your head and allowing them to collide so that you take one idea that can become 20 ideas. And these two ways of thinking, they're not really equal in society because 20% of people are divergent thinkers by preference. Some of them are like me where I'm ADHD, for instance, and I drink coffee because it self-medicates. It's one psychologist who's a friend of mine says, look, Rich, you have ADHD. And I said, what do you mean? You're drinking coffee all the time. I know you. So what that means is my brain naturally is going to be open to ideas coming in. I can't help it. I'm waking in the night. A lot of creative people, either they're born that way or they practice it because they want to get ideas. And so that muscle, if you will, in your brain is just having ideas come in. Well, you can't stay there. And only 20% of us are that way. So we feel oftentimes no one understands us.
Yeah.
Well, 80% of the people, 8 out of 10 don't understand you perhaps. So, but it's bridging between these two because I realized, and this is what scientists say, we need to kind of do both of these things. It's a whole brain. It's not, are you right or left brain? It's, are you creative means, are you able to use more of your brain together? Are you able to put language and pictures together, not just words, like metaphors? And so this is really, the Harry Potter. Are you able to see the metaphor, but also construct a story about Harry Potter? That it has some structure where you can read it and it makes sense. Both of those things are true, but in thinking in our brain, we can't do them at the same time. And this is what frustrates people around us as creatives because we're in a mode of creating ideas and then they say they're with us. They're really frustrated because we're creating these ideas and we're offering them all these solutions and things that we're willing to do. But then they're asking, okay, now do that one. And you say, well, wait a minute, I'm still in this mode.
Yeah.
And they don't want to get in the mode with us, so there's not a vibe going on. It's just completely a disconnect. So in a way, it's a dance that we have to learn. We have to learn to teach those folks who aren't that way that, first of all, they're creative too, but they only have half of it. And we only have half of it. So we need to embrace the awkward, which is the other side, in order to grow. So I used to be late for meetings, Ellen, all the time. And I don't know what happened, because I would get no, they call it time blindness.
Time blindness. I literally hashtagged that just a little while ago. That
Okay.
the less time I have, the more I would try to squeeze into those last 5 seconds. And I don't know what it is. And there you go again, fellow ADD. I don't know what it is about that lessening fan that says more can fit in. And you know what? Rich. This is totally left field here, but it just hit me. Maybe it's part of that divergent thinking that thinks more can fit with less. I can do more with less. When normally, the obvious thing is there's less time. I have to be at this meeting. There's less time for creativity. I should not be trying to squeeze out an entire song within the next 2 seconds before I leave the house. But that's what my brain says. This is totally possible.
And you know what? It could be possible because sometimes a song will come or whatever you're creating will come quickly, but there's a process to that if you want to talk about that. But it's like time blindness, the Greeks used to call it kairos and chronos time.
Yeah.
So chronos time, that's the clock. Oh no, I'm going to be late. I had to learn to understand chronos time a little bit more clearly, prepare for it, I should say.
Yeah.
My brain's on kairos time. They call it the flow, right? And that is where you really are creative. So sometimes you get in a flow. It doesn't matter where you're at. You want to capture that because when you're in the flow, it's a hyper-focused state where things can happen.
And time seems to stand still. Like there's no you lose that, and that's I think so many of us creators we love that moment when time doesn't mean anything. When you're in a worship service or like you said in a jam session or whatever, and people look up, it's like, what time is it? And because I love that the flow, the chronos becomes insignificant.
I wish some pastors learned chronos time during preaching.
Ah, touche to all the preachers.
Sometimes
So
they're not.
true.
Sometimes they don't understand. Like you might be in the flow, but you got hundreds of people out here saying, "Land the plane."
Yeah, yeah.
Pastor, we love you.
And I love that. Like you brought up another point that I wanted to jump into. There's so many good things here, but one of them that you mentioned was the 80-20%, the people that doesn't understand. And immediately what popped in my head is he's talking about teams. He's talking about having to deal with in collaborative spaces where you might have the person that has the deadline. Hey, this is due by 4 o'clock. I don't care how many how many ideas you have. This needs to be done versus that person that says, hey, we're in the process. Can you do it? So I have a feeling as a worship leader and as someone that had to deal with all that, you ran into a lot of moments when you had to navigate. How do I actually make these two parties, that one that wants it done in production and the other that wants to flow, and how those two coexist?
There was one time as a young worship leader, two people were on my way in to lead worship, and I just wanted to say hello to them because we at our staff at that church said we want to give everybody a look, a word, and a touch. And I said, I love that because if I was these people, they're going to see me up there. I'm going to be like 15 seconds late. Well, the senior pastor sees me and he isn't happy. And he literally just railed into me. And I think the people saw it that I was trying to say hello to. I don't know if they came back to church after that. But
Mm,
oftentimes we live in environments where there is this tension, and that's an extreme version of it, where we have a production. Um, it's just like this. We want music to sound certain good, but rehearsal's only this long. These players may not be able to do it if I don't give it this time. And that's it.
yeah.
And this is what we have to do. So we're stuck in those constraints. And but I see that there's a beauty in limitations. We have to understand as teams and as people who are creatives that time and space constrain us. We only have a certain amount of years that we're alive here on earth. We only have a certain amount of a church has a season that it's around. It doesn't mean it's going to be forever. So with all of that in play, really the dance with time has to do with the bigger sense of time, of what it is that who we are. So yes, we have to be constrained, but that's actually helpful to us. I call it the
Yeah.
blank canvas panic attack. So if I'm not given enough parameters, they say, Rich, it's like saying to a painter, just paint something for me. Well, what do you mean? Is it going to be a mural? Is it going to be a little canvas? Is it going to be,
Yeah, the tabla rosa, right? Like it's
yeah, there you go. Oh, so if we don't, so anyway, so all that to say, I think that's the problem with teams is we're afraid of limitations.
hmm
So, but really we are more paralyzed without embracing the limitations. And I call that the sandbox. We have to know where the border is so we can play within it.
That's so good. And I'm so glad you brought that because I was looking at that in terms of your framework in the book. By the way, I'm for sure go ahead just put this out there. It will absolutely have to put that in our resources as I recommended because I was just so intrigued by the fact that you were able to say, hey, something that is to many so ethereal. And yes, there are tons of books. I mean, my book, honestly, I did not trust myself to dig into some of these topics. So mine was very specifically to Christian musicians who gig and how do you guys manage it. And I was very practical. Now at the very end, I talked about evangelizing through your gift and how God uses the creativity. But my side, my mentality was I only want to speak to the people who are already doing this and tell them how they can survive it and not sacrifice their faith. You, on the other hand, I felt like you feel like more of a calling or a need. I guess you can talk to this now to address more of the framework of how we actually approach life. So tell me a little bit about why you approached Mind Blown the way you did with the framework that you did. Why did you feel like that was the message that the creators needed?
Yeah, I think creatives need to realize that what you are doing is a very human thing. We're meant to, like you play an instrument, it's human to start off with what little you can do and to get someone to teach you to do more and listen to new material to add that to your reservoir of things and then to produce something, to do it with others. Being a musician is really a good encapsulation of what this idea of creativity is. But in every other field of humanity, we need the same kinds of things. And so when I was studying creativity, what I realized is this creativity is what humans do when we thrive. So if we're not thriving, if there's war going on, it's terrible. I have two friends of mine who support worship leaders in Ukraine, who's their school. They had a school that they were a part of, and one of them would go for long stints to Ukraine. Those worship leaders no longer are being trained, for instance, there. I was just reading an article today about music schools and dance schools and athletic facilities and concert halls that were destroyed in the city called Bakhmut, I think is how you say it. It's all wiped out. Why war is so evil and God hates it is because it stops creativity in two ways. It ends the life of people who create, who have
Yeah.
potential someday. So that there's a band, there's a group of musicians I've been following who enlisted, went off tour and enlisted. They're Ukrainians. They want to protect their families. They're no longer making music. And it's tragic that, it's kind of like plowshares in the
Yeah.
guns.
In verse, yeah.
And they want to take their guns and turn them back into guitars. And so really, when we thrive as humans, I just wanted to say it for that purpose. When we thrive, we're able to create. We're able to be that band who is touring and who's making music and connections with people. Instead, what happens when we're not thriving, you're doing things like fighting a war. So it is what we do when we're at our best. Also, when we create, we help ourselves thrive and others thrive. When we're able to be who we're supposed to be. And all you who are creatives understand that there's certain work you do because you have to do it. It's muscle memory. You play a gig. But there's also things, if you don't do it, you can't survive. And
Right.
that might be learning a new song or your favorite player who you always wonder, can I get that lick ever? It's been 15 years working on it. Those are the kind of things you're trying to master. All these kinds of things are part of being a human being to keep you going. It's do I have a pulse or not? That's what it is. So creativity allows us to thrive as well. So I see it as this big thing, bigger than I thought it was. And when I mentioned earlier, I think ministry almost killed my artistry. And the reason for that was because I think a lot of it misses what this is. When we are artists, what we do is actually simply in public what everybody else is wired to do in their own way.
Yeah.
And so it's an honor to have the calling of being an artist or a musician. Think of in Exodus, the musicians and the craftsmen who were anointed to build elements for the temple. The words in Hebrew there, as I understood it, are about creating a guild, not just
Yes.
me being gifted to be a silversmith or a musician for the temple, but for me to be someone who's going to create a lineage of folks who can also create even better than I do. So this is what I take this whole idea of creativity. Yeah, we're this little person in this who gets to do some things, and it's really great. But we're part of what God intended for humanity. We actually get to reflect it publicly in a way, which is really cool. And that's an honor to do that. That's a way of prophecy the word apocalypse just means reveal.
Yes.
We're unveiling God. We unveil God when we actually are in that flow, when people can see what we've done that's taken years of practice to even do. Now, I started out as a jazz musician, and no one understood it. Even I didn't, because no one understands
So
you. Not supposed to,
we just.
right?
I'm so sorry. No,
You have to,
you hit home right there
right?
because as a jazz with my jazz degree, the one thing that I just did a gig on Sunday or Monday with our cooperative, our local co-op, and I already was apologizing for all the top 40 quotes that I was going to play and all the because I've learned over the years I need to relate to what people and that jazz degree again in so many different ways. Like you said, I know I'll let you continue, but that hits home because we said half the stuff we played, people are like, okay, now can you get to the melody again?
Well, but at the same time, if you're really good at it, you're going to do stuff like that. Like I remember, you ever heard of a saxophonist, Richie Cole?
Yes.
So Richie Cole's out at West Coast, and he'd have everyone sing their favorite little songs. Then he would play them as in order as everyone in the room played them, and then he would do it backward.
Well,
And he'd go, boo, talk about mind blown. And everyone in there who knew would know, it took a second to know, what is he playing now? So there's but to be able to do that, to sit in that group, which where a lot of us musicians would like save our pennies to get snuck in because we were underage to see the saxophonist, to see a person do that was an amazing thing because in a way it was reflecting, we all have this in us to do this. And it takes a lot of hard work. And to get that few moments, a band that's in a van that gets a few moments to play at a bar for 50 people, a lot of my church friends have no idea what that's like. They have no idea the discipline. You play at a church where someone brings a microphone to you and wipes it off and checks your battery packs and all that, where you're on the road, you're fixing things and soldering it while you're in the van.
yeah.
And you don't even know how to do it, but you're hoping it works for the next gig. And that's the hard work that artists put in society, whether you're this punk band that's on tour or a jazz musician like Richie Cole, who's like just lived and tortured himself to play that well. I mean, I've seen Miles Davis play, and you just like there's something Dizzy Gillespie, just mind blowing about people who have tapped into that part of their humanity. They've just been one. They have the genes and gifting to do it, but they had to choose.
Yeah.
They had to choose that, and that making that choice to say I'm going to be that, and that's where I answer that question about getting things done and getting hired. It really is about igniting something it's even harder work, but it's like it gets better results. So I don't see it as a either or. And that's the thing. It's a both and. I got to be this person and learn and find that inspiration, but then I got to let that inspiration out. And I call that breathing in and breathing out. Like you got to mine for inspiration. Sometimes it comes at you, but then you have to create an environment in your life where you always are looking for that, where you always are curious, where you're always trying to figure out a new lick. And I had a jazz piano teacher who sometimes wasn't drunk, but he had his like scotch on there. My parents had no idea. We were very conservative, and they dropped me off to this teacher. They just didn't know what they were doing. And, so he might have been intoxicated, but he just ignited me by giving me this, well, what if you were to voice this chord this way? You just write it out and then give me the paper, standard like My Funny Valentine or something like that. And I was like, what? And then I had to figure how do I get to this thing he just said you can do right here? But so inspiration sometimes will find us, but I had to be dropped off. I had to beg my parents to let me spend my paper route money
Yeah.
to have this teacher. They had to buy a piano eventually because, the family, we didn't have a piano. And that was a big sacrifice. I didn't realize how much for them. It takes a lot for us to get to a point where we have that inspiration. So music education, I was in a school in East San Jose that was a federally granted school that was lucky for me. I wasn't in the other side of the tracks because one of the vocal coaches that came to my high school vocal jazz group was Bobby McFerrin, if you ever heard of him before.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Was an incredible vocalist musician. We got taken out for field trips to see artists like Tony Bennett was in the Bay Area. And he said, hey, some kids, I just want to show kids what I do. And he called a bunch of schools. Well, only 50 kids out of millions of people showed up, and we're sitting in this auditorium in front, and Tony Bennett's showing us mic technique and what his band does and all this. I'm like, this is incredible. So inspiration is a gift that costs something. And if you have it, first of all, if you're privileged enough to have these experiences like I was, drink them in because they're gold, but you can find them too. You can invest in them. You can save your money to go see that concert or that painting. I was just at the Met in New York with my wife. We went on a trip, and it was just incredible to see Van Gogh's Cypresses. He had drawings, iterations that led up to them, so you could see that it wasn't just random strokes. It was this incredibly hard process he put in to even do one stroke. And it just blows your mind to see what it takes to create something great. So we can get a job done, we can play a gig, we can be somewhat masterful in the public size at what we do, or we could really be ignited and give even more for ourselves. And it's that part for ourselves that keeps us going when there's some things we have to stay awake through, which you all know what I'm talking about. And we all have to live there. We all have to earn a living, and that's okay. But we can't let that part of us shrivel that's human, that wants to grow and wants to live. And so that's why creativity, back to that, is such a big deal, because it's about us being, and of all people who should be human, it should be us musicians or artists, for sure.
Uh, so good, Rich. And here's one of the things that immediately came to mind as you were talking about that, the why, the remembering the why. I mean, it's cliche until it's not, right? It's when you have to face those moments like, yes, there's deadlines, yes, there's social media, yes, there's all these, yes, there's AI, yes, these competing things that seem to pull away from the soul of what we do. And yet at the same time, one of my greatest, this is not maybe the best theology, but I think I'm pretty close. One of the few things we know that will follow us from earth into heaven is creativity, is worship, is music. So I always said I'll be employed in heaven no matter what, because I know for a fact, based on, as you said, on revelation, on the revelation, on the revealing the apocalypse, that these are the things God likes. These are the things God is like, yeah, this part of aspect, I don't know, there'll be plumbers or lawyers, but I do know he likes music. I do know this part of the human art, the human being, seeds production on this side. It is bigger than that. And so I think so many of us, again, those of us who are in the trenches working, like you said, trying to fight their way through the noise of whether it's inside ministry or outside in the mainstream, there's just so much competing, but I think that fuels you. And I love the fact that you talked about the reality of, hey, you got to go out and find it. You got to go out to the museums. You got to go out to the concerts. You got to support other people. And so I love that. I just wanted to ask you specifically, as a creative yourself, you've written books, you've written songs. What is the next for you? What fuels you? What do you look forward to? So that, if someone's saying, hey, if I was rich, I'd be fine. I would be inspired all the time. What keeps you going? What's the next for you in terms of goals and things like that, even creatively?
That's a good question. I think some of that it's really a new dream. I think you get a certain age in life. So I'm over 50. I'm a late bloomer. I tell you what, we're not done. So that's a great question to ask. In fact, I'm still dreaming right now. I honestly don't know exactly what that looks like. What I do know is what keeps me going, what's inspiring me at the moment is meeting people like you, Alan, people who want to see others succeed. I think what we've done is we've turned creativity and art and music into a competition
Mhm.
when it really is about, we think everything's zero sum. And so it's not. And so the thing I'm trying to dream up is what can we do to prove that's wrong? We need more books. We need more songs, not less. There's only 5 churches apparently that really their music is spread out through the
Oh
worship
God.
environment.
I, I,
So
I,
why I
I'm,
know more than 5 people who
I'm
can
going to
write
say,
songs.
I'm going to put a plug in for a 6 in my ministry that we are
Well,
trying to.
see, there you go. And one of the things that's keep me going, I have a collaboration with my young adult daughter. Her name's Emily, and she's an artist in her own right. She's an illustrator. She did the illustrations on my book, so that's one of the best part of the books are
So
the
cool.
cartoons. But anyway, is to create music that lasts. That music is something that Dad is bringing a spice to it. I know the hymns. I know jazz theory. She knows Florence and the Machine and punk bands and all these other things. And to mash those things together to be who we both are, but to create together, that's what inspires me. I think that's the next thing. The next thing isn't for me to write a song like Elevation Worship. Next thing is for me to write a song that's never been written before because an old guy and a young gal at a little church never had the chance to not only write the song, but to perform it and sing it. And so I think that's what my group of Beautiful Liturgy, that's one thing that I see us doing to help others do it too, because it's a zero sum deal. It's if I win and my songs are out there, Alan's church's songs are out there too. And it's okay because of Spotify. It doesn't matter. We're not hurting the planet. We get more servers are okay. We don't have all these wasted CDs being thrown
Yeah,
around.
great point.
So all that to say is, this is what I think lasts is what we impart to other people. Literally, what for me is the next thing is planting a tree that I may not get to enjoy the shade for. Amy Grant has a song, "Watering Trees We'll Never See," and she's 62. My wife and I have been big fans. My wife, in fact, when she was in high school, Concord, where we live, was one of her biggest shows. She had this memory of us. She wanted to come back. And then, if you know, Amy Grant is an artist,
Yeah.
had a brain injury last year. And so she was supposed to come. We had his tickets. No, didn't come. But she worked hard to rehabilitate herself, which is in itself shows her commitment. She came and she's a master at giving her audiences a great show. But she was sharing this song with us. What was her single earlier this year that came out. And that's where I'm at too. This is a season in life where I need to be willing to water the trees that I will never see. And I think for those of us who want power and control, give it up, give it away. Make sure there's room at the table for more people who aren't like you, people who make you uncomfortable. Because the only reason they make you uncomfortable is because you haven't listened to them. You haven't invited them into the table. And what happens is in worship, in particular, the thing I spent most of my life doing, many, many years, is we have had worship revolutions. Why not have a worship evolution where we are passing on what we're doing to people, like those gilded people in the temple in the Old Testament, in the tabernacle, that is? Why don't we do that? This is what I envision. This is the reason I felt compelled to write the book the way I wrote it, because I think it just gives me a foundation to be able to talk about these things. I'm going to a conference called the Worship Innovators in October, which is a great place where a lot of these Christians who they want to give away what they know, people like Loop Community or Worship Artistry, these other guys doing stuff like you, Alan, where it's like, how do we help not just our own church, but anyone who it helps? And that's the way of the world now, if we are willing to embrace it. So that's the kind of tree I want to water. I may not be, I may
Yeah.
not be able to enjoy the shade of that, but am I willing to see that that's worth the investment? Because, like you said, the other side, we're going to still be who we are. And it'd be great to, as other people join us on that other side there, we hear the stories about how what we've done has given them the permission and the power to be more of who they were than we could be ourselves. So out of the trauma of trying to survive through ministry, the next thing for me is to really prevent as much of that in my brothers and sisters who are younger.
So I'm telling you that the analogies, the metaphors are rich when you talk about the tree.
And my
And
name's
I
Rich.
think wow, look at that. Look at the creativity just popping out. I love this so much. I am so thankful for you and your example. I can't think of any better way to close this out but to say that's what we're all here for, is to water these trees and to grow and the kingdom simply grows because we are planting those seeds. And it's there's no question that there's a harvest on it because of the nature of the seed. It's just it's the way the kingdom works, and we thank God He didn't force us to figure out botany or anything. He said put it in the ground, keep planting, keep watering, and in the creative side, that's exactly what we're doing and what you're doing. I'm so inspired by you, sir. Please let them know before we close out, for those who are old school and still use pencils and pens, who are going to write it down and not going to use the show notes and click the link, how they can find you, how they can connect with you and continue to learn more from you.
My site is very easy. My name is Rich Kirkpatrick, so it's rkblog.com. And my book's called Mind Blown, Unlock Your Creative Genius by Bridging Magic in Science. And you can go to my site and find stuff there. And our groups, music groups there too.
Nice. Well, I'm telling you, I'm looking forward to finding all of the magic and the science that you've been sharing in your writings. It's amazing. And again, there's more to come, you guys. There's more to come from this amazing gentleman. Thank you so much for partnering with me and our community. Just now, I just felt this kinship, and I am so privileged and honored that you were on the show. So thank you so much for joining us, my friend.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
My friend, thank you for watching this episode. If that blessed you, you got to make sure that you stay connected with this community and this channel so that you can get more where that came from. We're sharing great interviews, tactics, strategies, mindsets, lifestyle choices. Everything is going to help you become a totally confident creative. And don't miss an episode of the God and Gig Show. If you are staying connected to our channel, you'll be able to find us anytime we release new episodes. And you can check out some of our archives of almost 200 episodes now that we've shared over the last few years. Make sure you check out one of the suggestions right now, because it's probably perfect for you to continue to develop as a creative. And continue to stay connected with us,